Which one though? Hi, everybody. So I am inundated by this congressional hearing and the testimony by the doctors. So this is what the show is going to be about. I would like for you to join the show and watch, because it's really good information. And unfortunately, it is also highlighting how this issue has become so politically driven, and the Republicans and the Democrats still going at it in the time of a pandemic. We still can't come together. So I'm going to turn this down because this is probably distracting, but it's so exciting to watch. And we're all at risk, so you all need to be informed. But the hearing started at 10 o'clock today. Senator Lamar Alexander, he's the chairman of the Health Committee, and he started with an introduction. And the point of this congressional hearing is the U.S. officials, U.S. health officials are testifying in Congress regarding the return to school and to work. So I was just talking about this yesterday to my employees. Let me take off this text on the screen because that's not up to date. I will update that in a little bit. But I was just talking about this yesterday because I'm going to have an event where I come with other business owners and I talk about how to reopen your workplaces safely. And that's exactly what they're testifying about today, these health officials. And it is just so interesting. There was a doctor that was not testifying, that was just being interviewed, and she said that if your area's increase has spiked 10% or more since reopening, it's irresponsible to return at all. I believe Georgia falls within that 10% spike since reopening in phase 1. We're in phase 2 now, and it's so unfortunate because it is the plan of our schools, I know for certain, Gwinnett County, to reopen. And of course, they're giving the election to the parents as to whether or not you want to send your children back to school. But I question if it's responsible at all for the schools to reopen and give that option to parents, because some people have to go to work. They cannot afford to be out of work, to be home to school their children. And then what about the students who need special learning disabilities and need more assistance than the children who go online and do the digital learning? We call it DLD in Gwinnett County. There's some children and some parents who cannot do that because of their learning needs. So I'm sorry, I just dove right in because I'm so excited about this topic. Good morning. Hello. Thank you for joining, for supporting. I appreciate you all. If you have an opinion about this testimony, this hearing about Georgia reopening, about the reopening in your state, I'd like to know. I'd like to hear from you. Where is your area, depending on where you are? Tell me where you are and tell me what the spike is in your area and whether or not you're sending your children back to school. And if not, what are you doing? How are you managing them returning to school and you being able to continue to work? Hey there, cuz this has been a talk for the last week for me. Good topic. I know, it's so interesting. So at my workplace, and this is what we're talking about, several of the attorneys and staff members have children. So we're actually exploring the idea of having a classroom in our office. Thankfully, we just purchased an office building, so we have the space. And we're thinking about having a classroom for the children of the employees so that the employees continue to work, our business can continue to run, we're all safe, and the children can go to school and be monitored in our workplace. So that is something that, like I said, I'm going to have a networking event just to kind of talk about safe reopening for businesses to continue your business and to have your employees and their families safe while you're reopening. Let me jump back to this Senate hearing because it's just so intriguing to me. But as I said, there was a doctor who, I believe her name was Dr. Fisher, and I'm that may not have her correct. And she is not testifying. She was just being interviewed by CBS before the hearing started. And again, she said if your area's increase has spiked more than 10% since reopening, it's irresponsible to return to work at all. And the second question was, what, should schools be considering returning to schools at all during this time? And they're kind of looking at each area and the data available for the particular area that has to make the decision to determine whether or not it is responsible or not for them to reopen. So Senator Alexander started and reiterated that the question is not whether to return to work or school, but how to return safely. And that was his position about the reopening. He went through some letters that were written by the president of Brown University and Purdue University, whose concerns are, hey, if we don't go back and schools don't reopen, we may not be able to ever reopen. So there's some legitimate concerns about businesses and universities and schools and the money that it takes to be able to remain in existence if you cannot earn any income, derive any income because you're closed. So those were interesting because you got to understand all the perspectives. But at the end of the day, my position is I'd rather be alive and poor than going back to work and dead. I mean, it's just kind of, there's no way to kind of balance that. If your numbers are high, you can't go back. If your numbers are low, then there's a safe way to return. So the first, they had a series of questions that they are directing towards these physicians. One is, let's see, will medicine be available, medicine or vaccines be available to the general public by the time school reopen? How do schools get access to testing and who will pay for the tests? And are the CDC employees going to be available to schools to consult with on safe reopenings? So Senator Murray, she's a little firecracker, she's Democrat. Her concern, she did in her opening statements, because only Senator Alexander and Senator Murray, and Senator Alexander's a Republican, Senator Murray is a Democrat, only the two of them had opening statements. And then the first witness, the introduction of the witnesses was conducted by Senator Alexander, and then the questions started. So Senator Murray's main concern is equal access, okay? That people in poor communities are going to have the same equal access to vaccines, to antibiotics, to whatever it is that they're creating to keep people healthy, as well as the testing is available across the board to everyone. Anyone who is in need, who needs a test, can get tests, and the tests are equally distributed regardless of your race, your economic situation, where you live, she was very concerned about that because it's her position that has not been happening. So I commend Senator Murray on her, she's being very aggressive because she does not feel like the proper attention has been paid to the equal access to testing. So after, and I'm talking so fast, but I really want to get back to this, and I'm only going to talk for a little bit today because I want to hear the rest of the testing. And I think that, yes, so my staff has also included where you can watch this this testimony, this hearing live, and I really recommend you going there after I finish, after I'm done. Listen to me first, and then click the link and go to the live testimony. But it's really informative, and we need to be informed so that we can make the best decisions for our family, because that's the other thing. Regardless of what the government says, regardless of what the CDC says, and regardless of what the school says, your employer says, whoever is making the decision for their institution, you have to make the decision for your family. So the more information that you have, the more informed you are about making the decision. You should make a fully informed decision about your family and your safety and your welfare. The witnesses that are testifying today are Dr. Fauci, of course. He is kind of the leader on consulting about this pandemic. Dr. Redfield with the CDC, Admiral Giroir, and then Dr. Stephen Hahn. So the Dr. Fauci talked about the status of the test, which was, it's good to know that, because there are tests available, but there is a dispute as to who will continue to pay for the test. So the concern is, if schools reopen and the schools need to test more, who will pay for the test? The schools, the state? Who is going to pay for the continued availability of the testing? Dr. Redfield talked about precautions. Of course, we all know them: the mask, social distancing, hand washing, and sanitizing. Admiral Giroir talked about whether or not you can reverse the current trends, these spikes that are going up. Can we reverse those trends? Dr. Redfield reiterated, Admiral Giroir reiterated Dr. Redfield's recommendations about the precautions, but he also encouraged people that they need to stay at home and quarantine if you believe you've been exposed. He talked about surge testing. He talked about schools returning and businesses reopening, and confirmed that the CDC will provide recommendations. He also spoke about surveillance testing, which I was not able to get clarification on what exactly surveillance testing is in the short time that I watched this before going live. He talked about statewide testing plans, and he talked about pool testing, and I did get an understanding of that. So the idea of pool testing is everyone in an organization or a factory, school, everyone doesn't take a test. They pull the group together. They take a test. They get the results, and if any one person tests positive, then they test the entire group that was pooled. That was interesting. I never thought that was an option, but I can see how that would save money on testing, but it might be kind of redundant at this point, because and I don't know the stats, but it seems like even if you test 10 people, there is going to be one person that is positive. I'm not being pessimistic, but it just seems that whether you have symptoms or not, you're likely, or someone is likely to have COVID. The questions from the senator before I came on, the first question was advice to school superintendents on reopening. Again, I just think this topic is so important right now as parents and employees are making the decision on whether or not you send your kids back to school. Believe Gwinnett County, per my awesome paralegal, Christy Olds, Gwinnett County's deadline to inform them whether your child will return to school or go to school online is July 10th. So literally parents are having to make a decision about the children returning to school. But the question would be, well, what precautions are you putting in place to ensure that my child is safe? So that my child doesn't get sick, so that I don't get sick, so I don't take it back to my employees, to my colleagues and get them sick. So I thought that was a great question. Dr. Fauci responded with, it truly depends on the outbreak in the area where your school is opening. Determine where you are on the guidelines of the outbreak after reopening, and based on your phase of reopening. And again, because Georgia is a hot state, you would think that the counties in the state of Georgia are, or I would hope that we are listening to Dr. Fauci's recommendation. We're a hot spot. So you can open, but you have to open with some modifications. So he recommends modifying the school schedule, either have it online. Well, we've been doing that, so why not continue since the numbers are increasing? Alternate days or hours. Some counties, I think, are going on an A schedule, B schedule, and if you're on A schedule, you go to school Monday Wednesday, if you're on the B schedule, you go to school Tuesday and Thursday. That decreases the number of students that you're exposed to. You can spread the seating out. The classrooms are smaller. There are a number of benefits to that. And he just reiterated that the goal of the school should be to return to school. It's just kind of the way you do it. I will say this too. I heard some of the chairman's statements from pediatricians who discuss the negative impact of children not returning to school. And I think we all need to pay attention to that, because even though I believe it's the safest option is to stay at home or to be in workplaces that have reduced number of public interactions or reduced number of employees. I think that there's some benefit. I know, and listen to these pediatricians, there's definitely a benefit for our children and their social interactions and going to school and staying abreast of their learning skills. As I said earlier, some children cannot continue on their academic path without the assistance of specialized training because of their learning needs. So we have to be sensitive to that, but there's a safe way to do it. Okay, let's go to the next question that was asked, was the availability of treatment and antibiotics. Dr. Redfield talked about the antibiotics, using the plasma or antibiotics from the, and I'm no doctor, so I typed these notes, so y'all have to be patient with me in reiterating what I heard or I thought I heard. But they're using the antibodies from the people who recovered or who got better, and they're developing vaccines and treatments based on their antibiotics. So they're looking at the construct of those antibiotics, and then they're trying to mimic a vaccine and treatment based on those findings. The question was deferred to Dr. Hahn, who said that he's optimistic that several antibiotics will be available by the fall and eventually a vaccine. So that was a very important question for Senator Murray as well as Senator Alexander, because if we do return to school, what is the likelihood that we will have any treatments available if and when we return to school and to work? Dr. Fauci asked, what do we need to do to reverse the current trends when states try to reopen? I'm sorry. The question was asked to Dr. Fauci, what do we need to do to reverse the trends? And of course, and I think we're getting this now. If we're not, we should be, but this is what we need to employ upon our superintendents and people, the decision makers who are telling us we have to go back to school, or telling us we have to go back to work. They have to follow the guidelines. So Dr. Fauci reiterated that. Dr. Redfield was asked a question about, the timeline for a vaccine. He talked about an integrated plan for the vaccine. It was very vague. So he just kept saying integrated plan for a vaccine. He deferred to Dr. Hahn again. Dr. Hahn said that they're in the midst of developing a plan. I'm sorry, Dr. Redfield said they're in the midst of developing a plan as we speak, and there will be a plan for distribution. So that firecracker Senator Murray, she was like, well, what's the plan? What's the timeline? So I mean, these are great. Like, you gotta watch them. So again, she's a Democrat. She's a firecracker. She's like, you're not giving us any answers. So she's just on him, like, what's the timeline? And when you're gonna have a time? If you don't have a timeline, when are you gonna have a timeline for the timeline? So she's pressing him to give her a precise answer. And I just loved her questioning. And again, you try not to make this political, but you can see the political undertones in the responses from the senators. And it's just really interesting. But she's like, is it going to be weeks? Is it going to be months? And he just seriously could not give a timeline. And she just summed it up and said, she urges that a plan be available to the public as soon as possible. And that's where I stopped before I had to start the show. So I encourage you all to click on this link, watch the rest of this testimony and the questions and how the questions are being directed. So many undertones in this. I know it shouldn't be a political debate, shouldn't be any political undertones, but unfortunately it is. I watched a Florida town hall meeting the other day, and the people in the community were just so rude to the people in their local positions about not wanting to wear masks. Now this is Florida, so this is another hot spot. And I don't know if y'all need to see that video. I don't have any links today. I'm not doing that today. I really just wanted to focus on the content. But in that video, you just saw the community, the members of the community, just being rude and, quite frankly, very disrespectful to their local representatives who wanted to hear from the community about some of the mandates to wear masks in public. And the members of the community felt that it was a constitutional rights violation, that the government couldn't control them, that they weren't going to wear a mask no matter who said that they had to, and that the government couldn't mandate them to wear a mask. So there are people out there who are not going to comply with these guidelines. More the reason why you need to stay home. You can't control the actions of others. The government can't control the actions of others. You can't control the actions of others when you're in public. I get slightly offended when I'm in the grocery store and someone walks by me without a mask on. But I can't control that. So only you can control what you do when you go out in the public and the decisions for your family. So all I can say is make sure that you stay informed as you're making these decisions to integrate or reintegrate back into the public, back into schools, back into your workplace. I also encourage you all to look out for my networking link to talk about how to open your workplace safely. We are exploring, I think, some pretty innovative ways to be safe, to still be able to run our business, to be safe, and to be comfortable. So look out for my link. Pass it on to someone if you know any business owners who are really struggling with continuing to operate, continuing to be profitable, and continuing to be safe. So I just want to thank you all for joining. And I hate that I've talked so fast and kind of rushed through this today, but the Senate hearing is so good. So if you never watched a Senate hearing before and you want to see the drama, take a look. The link is on my comments. Thank you all for supporting me. Also, I am making a decision about the rest of the July, the shows that I'm going to have the rest of July. There's a lot of things happening that warrant a conversation, but it is July and it is the summertime. So I am trying to balance do that work-life balance assessment. So I think that I'm going to scale back on the Tuesday and Thursday, and I'll let y'all know how often, if at all, I will air in the month of July. So as usual, thank you for your support. I look forward to seeing y'all next time. And if you haven't watched this live, make sure you still comment. What is your workplace doing? Are you sending your kids back to school? If you aren't sending your kids back to school, how are you managing being able to work and your children being at home and going to school virtually? So I appreciate y'all. Have a good one, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good one.